Okay, welcome back. Let's go ahead and try and get our stability mode all set up. So jumping in here, you can see we've already got all kinds of stuff going on, but that's really all just hour meter management. Aside from that stuff, we also need to go ahead and start by setting our transitions to false. So what are our potential transitions coming out of here? Well, we've got alarm fixed, and then that sends us back to operation. We've also got offline signal 3, which sends us offline. So let's go ahead and copy both of these and let's work on them. So we're going to start with an LD false. We're going to load the value of false, and we're going to store that into alarm fixed signal. Then we're also going to store that into, and let's jump right back out of here and copy that offline signal 3. And we will jump back in and we will store this into there as well. So now we're making sure that our two transitions at the beginning of a scan will not be true, so we won't just transition out unless something makes us. So now that we've got that, we could also go ahead and I'm just going to copy that and run to the end because we already know how to make those things get out of here. So I will come down here and I will create something called transitioning, and I'm just going to paste that logic in there. And what do I want to load? Well, the first thing I want to load is we're going to look at the alarm fixed. So let's go into PLC program dot and take alarm exists. And instead of loading that directly, I'm going to go ahead and load in, which means I'm going to load the opposite of that. And I'm going to store that value into the alarm fixed signal. What does that mean? If an alarm does exist, then we are going to set a false for alarm fixed signal. If an alarm does not exist, then we're going to set a true value on alarm fixed signal. Sneaky stuff, right? Then we're going to load also from our PLC program dot, and that's going to be our system stop push button. And we're going to load that, not negating it, we're going to load that directly. So if it's true that somebody has pushed that button, then we are going to go ahead and transition into offline mode. So there we go. And from there, we can go ahead and just let it roll. We don't need to do any returns or any jumps because that's going to be the very end. First, we're going to have this stability routine, and that's going to include whatever other routines we need to create under there. But first, we know that all of our hour meter action is going to transition us right into this stability routine. So what are we doing with stability? Well, we already know we've got here, we don't need to run, but we've got a problem and we need to fix it. So we either need to drain our tank, we need to fill our tank, or we need to lower our temperature. So let's figure out how we're going to do that. Well, the first thing that we want to do is we want to see and identify step by step what our different alarms are and which corrective actions that we need to take. So I'm going to start by loading, and we're going to check in our PLC program, and we're going to see if we have a low level alarm. And if we do have a low level alarm, then we're going to jump conditionally to fill. If we don't have a low level alarm, we're going to go ahead and keep scanning. So next we're going to load back to our PLC program, and we're going to see if we have a high level alarm. If we do, then we're going to jump conditionally and we're going to go to drain. Now after that, one of two things might be the case. Either we've already fixed all of our alarms, or we still have a high temperature alarm. So we're going to do one more load, and we're going to go back to PLC, and we're going to check for our high underscore temp alarm. And based on that, we're going to jump conditionally to, and this is going to be cool. And assuming nothing is wrong, maybe we fixed all of our alarms, then we're going to go ahead and jump to transitioning. Okay, so now we've got to create some more routines, and the first one we're going to create is our fill. So fill colon, then we're going to have our drain colon, and then we're going to have our cool colon. That sounds funny when I say it, doesn't it? Okay, so what does fill look like? Well, fill simply means that our pump is running. So we're going to go ahead and send a start signal into our pump. So let's come over here, and first of all we're going to load a true, and then we're going to store that true into PLC program dot, and this is going to be our pump start. And if we're loading pump start, I also want to make sure that our pump stop is disabled. So we're going to load pump start, and then we're going to go ahead and load in a false, and we're going to store that to a couple of places. We're going to go to PLC program dot pump stop, and then we're also going to store that into PLC underscore program dot, and we want to make sure that we're managing our valve. So we're also going to store that false into valve open. But we do want to store a true also into valve close. So let's come down here, and instead of pump start, we're going to go ahead and take dot valve close. Good. So now that we've got fill logic, I think it will be really easy to go ahead and copy that and turn it into some drain logic. So let's come down here and paste that in. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to load true on what? Well, we're going to load true on opening our valve. So let's go ahead and paste valve open in here, and let's cut the pump start out of there. So if we want the valve to be open, then we want the pump to be stopped. So let's go ahead and say pump start is going to be false. So if we want the valve open true, then we want valve close to be false. And then we can go ahead and put our pump stop right here. So let's see what happens here. We want to drain the tank, right? So the valve is open and the pump is stopped. And that means that the opposite is true. We don't want to be starting the pump, and we don't want to be not class Wing, but closing the valve. Okay, so that should be our fill logic. That should be our drain logic. We're still going to need some navigation in there. But what about cooling? Well, we don't actually have a cooling system on our system. We don't have an air conditioner or a fan or a blower or anything like that. So how are we going to cool this thing? Well, the first thing we know we want to do is we want to go ahead and turn the heater off. That makes sense, right? So I think we're going to end up with similar looking logic to all that. So what's going to be true? Well, let's go ahead and leave the valve open, because if the valve's open, that's going to force the pump to run. And if the pump is running, then that means that we're actually going to be lowering our temperature a little bit faster. So how are we going to cool? Well, if we can leave the valve open, then that's going to force the pump to run more, and we're going to have to put the logic in there to make sure that that happens. But if the pump is running, that's going to be dropping our temperature down. One thing we definitely want to make sure of is we don't want the heater to be running. So one thing we can add in here is going to be to store, and that's going to be PLC program dot, and let's go ahead and stop our heater for absolute sure, and then we can take another store and put it under false, and we're going to make sure that we are not telling the heater to start. Okay, so now our heater's dead, but we are opening our valve and we are also running our pump. So that's basically the framework for those three modes, but we're still missing something. We still have some control parameters that we have to be minding. So coming up here to fill, we know we want to close the valve, we know we want to start the pump, but what about our heater? We also need to control our heater, right? So let's go ahead and say that if we are below, we want to keep ourselves at a decent temperature, but we really don't want to sweat the temperature too much. So let's try to run this heater anytime we get below 400, and then let's try to turn it off if we get up to about 450. So come down here, and we're going to go ahead and load. And let's load from PLC program dot, and we're just going to look straight to our temperature. And we're going to see if that temperature is LT or less than, and we want to look at 350. So if it's less than 350, then we're going to jump C, and we're going to go to, we'll just call this more heat. That sounds good. And then let's say it's not less than 350. Then let's check and see also if it's greater than 400. And if that's true, then we're going to jump C to less heat. And assuming we don't do any of those jumps, then we will go ahead and jump to transitioning. So we will jump transitioning. Okay. So now we've got a full set of logical control on fill mode. What about drain mode? And we also need to worry about the same things. We need to worry about temperature there as well. Well, we've already got such good logic here that I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in there because I think it's going to work just as good. So then when we come down to here, we're either going to go into, if we went into cool mode, then that's already controlling our temperature. But otherwise, let's come down right here and we'll go ahead and put in our more heat and less heat. So we've got more heat, colon, less heat, colon, and those are going to be simple. We're just going to turn this thing on or turn this thing off one way or the other, and I can see here we've already got the logic for that. So I'm just going to paste that in here and paste that in here as well. So let's get rid of everything that doesn't pertain to the heater. And there we go. So more heat, that's going to be our start. And we're going to flip-flop the stop right here. And then if we want less heat, then we want to keep it the way it is. True on stop and false on start. Okay, so now we've got that piece, and after we go to one of these, we're definitely going to jump to transitioning. We're not going to go into cool mode. So there we can jump transitioning, jump transitioning. So let's pretend that we actually come down here into cool mode. Well, now we're managing the heater, the valve, and the pump. And we're doing all of those kind of in an emergency fashion because we're saying, man, we're too hot and we need to get this thing down. Well, there's a couple of things that can happen. One, we don't want to overfill our tank. And two, we don't want our mixer running if we get down to be too cold. Well, looking at this, it looks like, I've got pump stop. And if I'm cooling, I actually want the pump to be running. So I want pump start to be true, and I want pump stop to be false. So there we go. But, here's the thing. What does my actual level look like? And if my level is too high, then, I need to do something a little bit different. So one thing I can do, let's go ahead and pull my pump control out of here, because I'm going to put that into a separate routine. So let's get pump out. And so now to cool, we're going to open the valve and we're going to turn the heater off. So that is going to cause us to drain and not heat. But then we need to evaluate when we can turn our pump on and when and if we need to turn our mixer off. Well, I think as far as the mixer goes, I don't think we're going to have an issue, because obviously the problem is that we're, way too hot. So our mixer's not going to come on. Let's forget about that. In a real world environment, we would probably program something in there just in case, but for now, let's go ahead and say that we don't. What we do want to put in here is going to be some level control. So let's go up here, and I know we've already got some logic evaluating our level. So let's pop up and see if we can find that. And no, it looks like we haven't created that yet, so that's just fine. We're going to get to. Let's go ahead and load from PLC program dot, and we want our level. And we're going to evaluate that and see if we're less or if we're higher than what set points we want to maintain. And in this case, we're really trying to cool our tank off. So we want to run this thing as much as possible. We'd like to spend our time with the pump running. So let's say if we're trying to normally control the level between 20 and 80, so we'll start by looking to see if our level that we just loaded is less than 30. And if it is, I'll just jump C to, and we'll call this filler up some. Okay, that sounds good. Otherwise, let's say that it doesn't need to be filled. Then we're going to check and see if we are greater than 70. And if we are, then we're going to jump C to shut the pump off. And let's assume then that we don't need to be filled up, we don't need to be shut off, we're fine where we're at. Then we're going to go ahead and jump to transitioning. So let's go ahead and drop that there. And then we've just got, I believe, 2 more routines to create here. That's going to be filler up some and shut the pump off. Got it. And we can just go ahead and copy this, because that looks like it's going to be pretty much exactly what we need. If we had something that dealt with the pump, that would be even better. And maybe I'll just go ahead and take all of this. That should do the trick. So let's come down here and paste that in. Well, we don't need this temp control anymore, so we can go ahead and drop off all of that. We're going to jump to transitioning, and we are not controlling our valve. Our valve is going to stay open. So let's go ahead and get rid of our valve controls. There we go. So now we've got something that we can work with. And I'm going to copy all of that and just go ahead and paste that right under here as well. Good. So if we need to filler up some, then we want the pump to start and not stop. And then if we want to shut the pump off, well, that's when we're going to hit pump start or hit pump stop and disable the start. And then we're going to go down into transitioning. So kind of a lot of jumps, but I think at this point we've got it to where we're not going to break anything. And if we get into this routine, we should actually come out having made something better. So at that, I think we've got it, and we already programmed in our transitions. Yep, we're going to alarm fixed, or we're going to offline. Okay, so let's jump out of there, and I think we've got our stability mode fixed. So that's going to get us in and out of that mode. We've got operation. We know how to get in and operate in there. Our offline is done. The only other thing we need to do is our init routine. So let's go ahead and stop here, and when I come back, we will work on the sim logic and set up our init step. And man, after that, I think we're good. I think we've pretty much got this thing. So take a break, and I'll see you when we come back.